please remember I was in the Army, but I'd have told those guys a long time ago to go ahead and do something about it. And actually, I think when I first went in, I probably wouldn't have, because at that time, I believed my country could do no wrong. Now I know it's not a question of our country doing wrong, it's a question that even if it's going to hurt us, we have a moral obligation to do the right thing. As a matter of fact, in the Army Leadership Manual, it tells you, even if you know it means your career is going to be destroyed, you have a moral obligation and an obligation to your country to do the right thing, even if in the end it's going to hurt you. I almost learned that lesson the hard way when they were going to court-martial me, because I said, you know what, I'm not keeping quiet about UFOs anymore.
Good for you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yes.
And Blue Book was just basically a front, wasn't it?
It was a public relations group, and everybody knows the story about Captain Thomas F. Mentel, right? January 7th, 1948, when at Mountain Open Kentucky, he saw the UFO up above him, and he was chasing after it, and he went ahead, and finally he saw it was, he said, it's above me, traveling at about half my speed. I'm going to close in on it to try to get a better look. I'm going to go to 20,000 feet. Now, they didn't have equipment for oxygen, okay? So, at that time, you were told at 17,000 feet, you break it off. You don't go any higher, because you can go into what I guess they call it vertigo, where you have loss of oxygen and all that, and become very disoriented. And they said that's what happened to him when he crashed. Now, I can buy that much. Hynek and everyone else came out and said, and now keep in mind, Venus wasn't in the vicinity there. And, you know, with Venus being there, disregard the fact that it's daylight and there's an overcast and all this, but with Venus being in that position, they had to come up with some answer, because now you have a pilot that was killed. When he got to 20,000 feet, he kept going. Finally, there was a sufficient loss of power in the engine that caused it to go ahead and head back down, and it crashed back to Earth, demolished the aircraft. But they had to come up with some answer. Now, they went to Professor Hynek and said, we have to come up with some answers. Well, Hynek and a couple of other astronomers knew, well, wait a minute, yeah, well, you know, the planet Venus is right there. Under certain conditions during the day, you can see the planet Venus. On this day, it was possible that you may have been able to see it, but it'd be just a little pinpoint of light. You look up, and you see that pinpoint of light. Okay, then you look back down, you know, take a sip of your coffee, look back up. You're going to have to search again to find that little pinpoint of light. That would be Venus. There's no evidence that it was visible, but conditions were right for that to occur. With that being said, it would be from 1948, when this incident happened, all the way to 1953, when Captain Ruppel, who was head of Blue Book, was talking to Hynek. And he brought it up to Hynek, says, you know, there are a couple of astronomers that have come in and said that there's no way Venus could have been seen on that day. He said, yeah, I know that. Well, you were, you know, the scientific advisor to Project Blue Book, and you said absolutely positively that's what it was. He says, yes, I did, but we knew at that time it wasn't the planet Venus. Anyhow, the conversation was short, simple, and sweet, and it was decided to drop the issue. Hynek knew for a long time. During the Condon Committee in 1953, January 53, Hynek went there. Hynek went there to tell the Condon Committee, okay, I have been involved with a lot of these cases. I know of incredible events that that have been reported by highly incredible people, and these should not be ignored. Had they pushed him further, he would have probably went ahead and said, and I don't know this because I can't read his mind, but he would have probably went ahead and said, I too feel that in some of these cases that were interplanetary vehicles involved. Edmund Scientific back in '77 put out a 3-part program with Hynek narrating it on a audio cassette tape, 3 of them, about 100 slides. I have a copy of that. I know it's going to wind up being lost to prosperity because I have no means of replicating it, but I wish I did. Because what Hynek had to say in that 3-part presentation makes it clear he knew one thing and one thing for sure, that someone from someplace else other than this planet was visiting us. This was the man who went ahead and said that he was sure UFOs were like, the sea serpents. They come with the season, then they go with the season. Well, you notice that they didn't go. We can go ahead and say, I don't like the rain, therefore it's not going to rain here no more. It's still going to rain. You're not going to stop it that way. So the whole situation is, we said we're going to stop investigating UFOs. By the time we stopped investigating UFOs in 1969, we already had a different name. Objects in space that we can't identify, we call those fast walkers. We still call them that. Fast walkers. And, the whole situation is, in, I think it was '88, we had 187 fast walkers, unknown objects that we were tracking. At the end of the day, we still had, out of that 187, we had 134 that were unknowns. The reason for that is we have everything cataloged in space, except every now and then something might come loose. Something as small as a screwdriver or as a glove. It's got a catalog number. It's floating in space. You know about it. There's a boat off one of the shuttlecraft up there that got loose and in space. We're tracking it. We're tracking it. It's got a catalog number. But every year, we're picking up objects that are out there, but we don't know where they come from. We call them fast walkers. So you people aren't going to ask about, was that a UFO? Oh no, we know what that was. The other thing is that when it comes to scrambling fighters to intercept UFOs, we do that. But how do we do that? We don't call them UFOs. We call them uncorrelated targets. And when Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out, Hynek was the one that went ahead and said, okay, when you're doing this about the UFO being picked up in the opening scenes, don't call it a UFO, call it an uncorrelated target. And they were calling it that in the tower until finally the guy asked the pilot, do you wish to report an unidentified flying object? No, control. We wouldn't know what to say. Because a lot of people who were really concerned. One pilot in '52, and this is in one of the Blue Book files that they had, status reports. They were very concerned. Pilots cannot want to report UFOs. Radar pick up something, call, do you see anything there? No, tower, we don't see anything. They're flying wingtip to wingtip with the UFO. But they're not about to report it. That could hurt their career, okay? But worse, if it was some type of new, unconventional aircraft that had been created by the communists or someone at the time that was hostile towards the U.S., it could have turned out to be a tragic event. The Air Force knew that, by the way. And in this case, that's what they were talking about, because they were concerned about pilot's not reporting. Because a pilot's gonna pay a price if he reports a UFO, okay? Even if it's very true, there's radar and everything, you go through what's called intensified debriefing, I went through it. And that's horrifying. You will take sleep over eating when you're going through that. Mine lasted 5 days and 4 nights. But once you go through it, you don't want to go through it again. Any pilot who had a sighting of high strangeness, and there's all kinds of evidence backing that up, they didn't want to report it. But they would still be talked to by intelligence officers when they landed to determine whether it was necessary to have that intensified debriefing. And if they thought, okay, it's a good deal, we're not going to have to worry about it, 70%, 80%, 90%, this person is going to talk. And it was based on a percentage. So they would go ahead and let it drop. Well, one pilot said, I'm speaking for every pilot, I'm sure of this. But I could be flying wingtip to wingtip with a UFO, and I would never report it. And that had the Air Force concerned, and rightly so. But in Vietnam, we can't have UFOs in Vietnam. That's a war zone. If you have UFOs in Vietnam, you're going to have to engage them. I agree. Well, hopefully I'll have enough time to go over all this, so we'll go ahead and get started on it. And like I say, when you convert it from a PowerPoint presentation to a PDF file, a lot gets lost, but we'll try it here. And this presentation I actually gave here a couple years ago, and it was called UFOs in Vietnam, the Untold Story. Now, we actually tried to go ahead and make a flying saucer. We called it Project 1794. And we worked on it throughout the 50s. This right here is actually what we wanted to come up with. This was the object that we hoped that if we worked long enough on, we would be able to come up with. And this is from Project 1794. And as we came up with this, I can tell you because a couple of kids went ahead, took the manuals that I had and looked at them, and took the graphics of them, and actually made 2 models, this and the Avro car. Like the problem they had with the Avro car, it wouldn't fly. It would put enough air under it, it would lift up, and move forward if you were the pilot, and it would move forward, or move to the left, to the right. Very hard to control. But this craft here, based on the, and the documents are in the DVDs here, by the way, Project 19 of 1794. And if you go over that and make a skeleton of it, you'll see it will fly. It will fly. You can get it to go up, you can get it real easy to control. Anyhow, this was the Air Force's dream. This right, and oh, by the way, it goes several thousand miles an hour. Now from the scale model, and these were kids, not professors. So if the Air Force went and pushed for this, they'd probably come up with something. But the whole situation is, they didn't really push too awful hard, or did they? Because we do have some strange things flying around. And not all UFOs that are of extraordinary appearance and what appears to be capabilities are necessarily from outer space.
Were they using anti-gravity propulsion in the 1794 model?
They didn't acknowledge it. This actually, with what the kids use, is very sound technology that could be used aerodynamics, not something exotic. But when McDonnell Douglas started getting involved, they were working on a new horizon. this is what the Avro car is, this is what they wound up with. And, bear with me, I have problems, you know, getting it to move around because I lose the little arrow here on what I'm supposed to be doing. But like I say, you'll have this, and I'm sure everybody's got a, computer that they put it on, and you'll get to see everything there. But this is what they wound up with. This right here is on static display at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. In front of, I think it's the Transportation Division, as to one of our failed attempts at making a flying saucer. And the technology was there and we could do it. Well, the technology to a degree was there because we had back engineered some UFOs already. The technology for the V1, the V2, the V3, the V4 that the Germans were going to be using in the Second World War, and the V1, V2 they did use, the technology was there. We didn't have it. At the end of the war, Operation Paperclip went into play, and it was very crucial to get the scientists and the technical personnel who work with those over on our side as quickly as possible. And that's what we wanted to do. It didn't happen where we got everyone. Once again, I have to go back to the time we were trying to get the people out of there, and the fact that we were trying to go ahead and acquire that technology and make it our technology, and it gets integrated in our technology. So now it was part of the accepted technology that we work with on a daily basis. No big deal. And that's the big thing about doing back engineering, making it part of your technology, where it's no big mystery. Even though, you know, you don't know the full story about it, where it came from, all this good stuff. And, you know, we were going ahead and we were working on that. They did not want to go ahead and make it known to the public that we had to get this technology, because if we didn't get it before the former Soviet states did, then the USSR would be technologically more advanced than we are in those categories. So it was very imperative that we had to try to get this taken care of, and we worked on it. Well, as it turned out, we got very concerned in '46 that the Russians were far ahead of us in this type of technology and service. This was because of sightings of ghost rockets in Denmark and Sweden. We went and told the public that shame on Denmark, shame on Sweden, they're making all this up because we want to go ahead and get this information out to the public, that there's nothing to it, that, you know, these people are just making up the stories. Well, they're not making up the stories. It would not be, once again, till November and December 2016, very quietly, the CIA would release the documents, making it clear that we didn't believe they were lying at all. That, in fact, something was going on. And it became an embarrassment, actually, right around 2014, 2015, when the CIA was point blank and behind closed doors asked, wait a minute, tell me what's going on here. We have a situation where the Robinson panel says, well, we knew that the V2 and the V1 existed, but initially we thought that there was nothing to them. We thought they were the same thing as Foo Fighters. But we knew because what? We came up, we found debris. Well, in '46, we didn't find no debris. Also, in '46, what they were reporting was highly maneuverable. Not like the V1, not like the V2. But we thought it was technology that was acquired from the research done by the Germans on the V1, V2, V3, and that the Russians had actually made progress, and now we were concerned. But the whole situation is, it wasn't Russian, it wasn't ours, it was not a ploy on part of Denmark or Sweden to get more electronic equipment to make better and greater radar. Something actually was going on. And when you know what was going on there about some of the things that they were trying to do as far as creating weapons of mass destruction in that area, the former Soviet states, that is, then you understand why our visitors would be interested. Every war we've had, they've been interested. Vietnam is no exception. Anyhow, we could not buy UFOs, and by God, we did not want our soldiers calling them UFOs. But there's something going on. What are we going to do? Oh, somebody came up with a bright idea. We're going to call these enemy helicopters. Now, why are we going to call them enemy helicopters? It's real simple. Radar observers, people on the ground observing these lights, they're going to see these lights traveling a lot of times at real slow speed, just like a helicopter. Stop on a dime, go travel real slow, just like on a helicopter. The only thing is that one thing everyone overlooked, except the command at MACV headquarters. I'm talking about the Army here, okay, not the Air Force, but the Army, okay? They went ahead and said, wait a minute. You know, helicopters, except for the MZ-500, and when you leave here, forget that nomenclature, because it's never been acknowledged except for a couple times, and it's still classified. That was a helicopter that was very, very quiet, but you would still hear that, you know, swishing of the blades. You can't do away with physics. That's part of the physics of a helicopter. So it was quiet. We used it, as a matter of fact, where they had this one raid there in Afghanistan, I think it was, where we had some people killed. We lost one of the helicopters, and I can't remember the name of the raid.
That was where the guy signaled bin Laden in Pakistan.
Yeah, and that was it. Anyhow, we lost a helicopter there. Well, you know, everyone thought, okay, it's just a helicopter. It's just no, it wasn't just a helicopter. You know, we wouldn't have been at dead reckoning, risking lives to blow just a helicopter up. That was one of the MZ-500s. It was classified at that time. Once again, still classified to this day. And I'll go so far as to say I'm not too sure that it actually has technology that's involved that was developed by the human race. We may have gotten that technology from someplace else. But with that being said, I don't know that for a fact, but it's still way advanced for its time. But they went ahead and they had that. But here it was, they had all these helicopters. So when they'd see them, they'd go ahead and say, well, they were helicopters. And this is what we're going to call them. Now, they had a problem here. Because, you know, G.I. Joe, he knew the difference between a helicopter and something unusual. The people who were the radar observers, the technicians, highly trained people using radar, they knew what they were seeing on their radar scopes. But, you know, the problem was they were told this is what you're going to see. The problem that most people can't get around is the fact most people are going to go ahead and let human nature set in. You tell me it's a helicopter, I'm seeing all this stuff that indicates it's not. I want somebody to know this is not a helicopter, because you're putting my life on me. Because we're in a war zone, and you're trying to ignore something that has a potential, that is a potential threat to me and my comrades that are in that war zone. What am I going to do? I'm going to use somebody turn my nose to UFO. And they did this. So we have documents for reference that UFOs. And these right here, this shows some of the manuals dealing with Project 1794. Oh, and did I mention these documents do not become available to the public until, what was it? I think it was 2014. We already knew about what we call, silver glove, which was, the Avro card. And this was supposed to be, carry off on the Avro card, or the Avro card was carry off on this project. So, we knew about that, and we knew about this being, but this right, these documents, no, you wasn't supposed to know about these. Anyhow, they had to come out and hit up on it. This right here is, talking about they never achieved their dream of getting what they wanted. And that we eventually came to the situation where we were noticing things flying around that we had no control over. And of course, we didn't want the media to pick up on them, but we had to deal with them. And it wasn't one of those things you could hide from, your forces on the ground, your forces at sea, your forces in the air. So we decided to call them enemy helicopters. And of course, unidentified aircraft, because some of these did appear, and we were taught even at that time, tried to say that some of them, unidentified aircraft, possibly a MiG-15 or a MiG-17, and we knew better. And some of the people even got chastised because they said, look, this is a UFO, it doesn't fit the category of MiG-17, doesn't fit the category of MiG-15, this is a UFO, it doesn't conform to any known aircraft flying. Theirs are ours. Anyhow, just because they're flying around, that made them a potential threat. Yes, ma'am?
Clifford, there was a lot of journalists out there and cameras as well. How did they deal with the people that were non-military that were seeing things, and how did they?
Actually, we kept them out of the location where these events were taking place.
Okay.
My Lai happened. If we had the media there, My Lai would have never happened. It would have never happened. When you have war criminals that take place, you don't do it in front of the media. Eventually, a lot of the stuff that went on, you can never justify the innocent slaughter of innocent people. You can never justify that. But the whole situation is, there is actually a physiological parallel that goes with that as to why these things occur. People think, and actually when we started to do the body count, we figured that this would tell the American people, we're doing a good job in Vietnam. You know what the American people overlooked? The Pentagon got scared to death. At one point, and this was sometime in 1970, 71, we did analysis of the numbers of the weekly body counts we were giving. In 70, 71, at a top secret level, a report was released. It made it clear that something's wrong with those numbers. Because if they were right, we effectively killed every man, woman, and child in both North and South Vietnam. Now, with that being said, I know the time that we hit up on river rats, and they were being pressed for body counts. And I won't name the colonel that said it, but the colonel said, those are enemy rats. You will include them in the body count. Well, we had no enemy kills that time. But you know what? We had a body count of well over 275, I can't remember what it was. But I know it was, not 280, but well over 275. What were they? River rats. And that went in as an enemy killed in action. So, Vietnam was a war that was very, very, very difficult to understand. I mean, I went there 100% believing what I was doing was right. I got there and I became aware of one thing. I can get killed tonight. And if I do, and I meet my maker, I want it to be, no matter what's going on here, the madness that's going on there, that I can feel certain, meeting my maker there, that he'll be satisfied that in my heart and within my mind, I did that which I consider to be morally right. I started an orphanage in Vietnam. Started off with 23 kids. When I left, we had over 1,700 kids. There were no state-run orphanages in Vietnam. war's over, that orphanage still exists. For the sake of the kids that need it, I'm glad it's still there. In any war, it's the kids that suffer the most. There's a story I'd like to tell, but I can't because I'll break down. And some of the things I'm telling you right now, it's hard, but I feel it needs to be told. And between me, you, and the fence post, the Army's finally recognized that situation. So I'm talking to some people here next month. And I don't think they're gonna be able to help me. I feel like some wanted to give me money to keep my mouth shut. But you know what? I'm not applying for money. I'm doing it because it needs to be, this right here is part of it. There are people, yes.
I don't wanna get too personal, but third party, what do you think they would offer somebody, let's not say use somebody to keep their mouth shut, the knowledge that you have, for example? I'm just curious, if you throw a number out there?
Yeah. How would you like to just be getting $3,000 a month? And there's a COLA attached to that, or what more? Just to go ahead and be happy and don't say nothing. After all, it's not your problem.
That's not very much, actually, $3,000, I would've thought it'd been a lot more than that.
Oh, it can be.
What attached, a code attached to it? To
What's that?
3,000? What is attached to the 3,000 that I couldn't hear the word?
Did you say code attached to it, is that what you said?
No, there's a COLA.
COLA,
Yeah, which means it can go up.
okay.
Oh, cost of living.
Cost of living.
Yes.
I'm just curious, if you were calling the fast walkers enemy helicopters, what were you calling the real enemy helicopters?
Enemy helicopters.
Okay, so they just got all
Now,
thrown in
I'm
together.
gonna tell you why they didn't have much of a problem in Vietnam with that. In Vietnam, you probably think that the North Vietnamese had hundreds of helicopters, right? At any given time, they had between 25 and 35 helicopters. Now the CIA was very careful in the documentation they released. They were still calling them enemy helicopters. They didn't even mention them in the daily briefs that they gave to the President of the United States. They mentioned air activity, but they did go ahead and call that unusual or unidentified air activity. A helicopter you can chase down. A jet's gonna overrun a helicopter. And guess what? These helicopters, the jets that we had there, could not overrun it. And there's a documentation here that will show you that. That's why I want everybody to have a copy of what I'm talking about, because I'll go ahead and I'll get distracted and I'll bring up, but there's something you should know, and I'll do that. And I apologize for that, but you know, the whole situation is, I found that if I go ahead and let it be where people have the documentation, that after the talk, they're not gonna have me boring them with what I'm saying. They can go and they can read it and study the information and find out. They never told us this. Then you can ask yourself, why? When you ask yourself, why? Now, you start hunting for answers, and, you know, there aren't any answers. And they're gonna tell you that they have nothing. It's like with moon dust and blue flight. When I did my congressional report and they had to answer to Congress, two things happened. They came back, oh, well, we destroyed all that information. That's weird, because when I requested that they release the documentation that they told me was classified, it was the same year that they told Congress, oh, we destroyed all that. But they came back to me on my appeal and said, it's necessary to keep all the documentation information, moon dust and blue flight, classified. And folks, it wasn't a secret classification. communication. Now, why do I keep harping on moon dust and blue fly? You want disclosure? You get those documents released, you have disclosure. One thing I put on this one also, on these here, and they're crucial documents, is where the OSI was involved with some UFO recovery operations back in the early 50s. So I hope you enjoy reading those too. They were never meant to be part of Project Blue Book. As a matter of fact, they aren't part of Project Blue Book, but they were part of the OSI files that in '75 had to be incorporated with the Blue Book files. But the OSI files that are there with Blue Book, they're entirely something different. The OSI files, not Blue Book files.
All right, just one more quick question about the enemy helicopters. To your knowledge, was there ever an engagement between these enemy helicopters?
Sure was.
And also, would you say that's probably the reason why we were there so long, is we're trying to deal with those guys, not so much the Vietnamese?
No, we were there so long because of the politics and, you know, the little people, as we call them, the communists, the North Vietnamese, they had a high resolve. Most people that I ran into, and even the VC in the South, they would actually be taken prisoner by North Vietnamese, and they would be indoctrinated to become VC. And you know, by the time we got out of Vietnam, we believed that as many as 75% of the people, one way or the other, was actually being involved in giving information to the enemy and to us. But you know, that was a means of survival. Most of the people there, they saw there'd be no difference, no matter whoever took over. But my wife's Vietnamese, so you know, even after the war, I was finding out what was going on in Vietnam. But the situation is that we won the war 3 times in Vietnam. Diem could not understand how it is that we won the war, and right after we won it, we changed the intensified bombing that started in '68. We won the war. But then, because of the media pressing our elected officials, decided, let's go a little easy on it. Then, when we went into Cambodia, most of you're going to hear this for the first time, I'm quite sure. When we went to Cambodia, we were told, okay, the first 20 miles is as far as you go. None of us knew that we were going to Cambodia. I woke up at about 3 in the morning, and don't worry about getting back or anything. We're going on 3, that's one of the personnel carrier that I was going on. We were going to go across in Cambodia. We were invading Cambodia, okay. We go across. The first 20 miles were easy. Very light contact. We didn't know we were going. They knew we were going. Somebody informed the enemy. Who? We don't know. But they knew. Anyhow, situation maps came out. These were maps that would be given out every week or so. And somehow, the 20 miles inside of Cambodia, there was a mess up, because now the new situation map that we got showed that we had only gone 5 miles into Cambodia. Commanders decided, let's hit up on this very quickly right now. And that's what we did. We hit up on it. You know what? That 21st mile, we started to get a price. The 21st mile cost us the first 500 American casualties by the time we got out of there.
By what?
What's that?
That they went at the beginning in the 21st miles.
Yeah, the 20 miles, you know, we met light resistance. Somebody told them we were coming. The 21st mile, we started to pay our price. The 21st mile, we lost our first 500 Americans. By the time it was over, we had lost over 3,000 Americans. North Vietnamese had lost almost 100,000.
Wow.
The reason for that, all of their equipment was there. When we went back to South Vietnam, the first 6 months after that was a life of grandeur. Canaan Base Camp got rocketed every night. It became known as Mole City because you lived underground, because if you were above, you're likely to get hit with a rocket. Fire mortar around. But the whole situation is, what happened was that after that, we went in 25 miles actually, because of the Phantom 5 miles. But that denied them a lot of weapons, because we had a lot of stashes that had weapons, had ammunition, and we destroyed it in place and didn't leave it there for them. So they had to replace all of that. But the whole situation is, if you're playing a football game and you never go to where you're trying to score, you're only playing defensive, you're not going to win the game, because your hands are being tied unless you're permitted to go ahead and play offensive where you're scoring. You're going to lose. Well, in Vietnam, it was purely defensive. We've known since the American Revolution, you cannot win a purely defensive war. Everybody thinks that, well, we just fought here on the U.S. soil. No, we didn't. We fought on the open sea. When we started fighting on the open sea, that made it an offensive war. So the gains we earned by fighting the open sea, and also stopping the British troops from coming in from sea, that helped us squeeze the enemy that was here in the colonies and force their surrender, thus making it for the colony. And, you know, Britain never felt that we actually won the war. We were separated, that is, from the British Crown, so to speak. That actually would not happen until the War of 1812. At that time, we truly won our independence. Prior to that, any Britain worth their salt would not say that the colonies were separated from the British Crown. But you have to go on the offensive. If you don't go on the offensive, you don't win the war. There were three times we went ahead up on the offensive that brought us close to winning the war. The only thing we had to do was wait for them to go ahead and say, we surrender. But just before that was about to happen, just about the time it was about to happen, the media brought pressure onto our elected officials. They were worried about being reelected. They didn't give a damn about the people we had in Vietnam. So the whole situation is, they did what the media wanted. Thus the war continued. Now, with that being said, if it wasn't for the will and the resolve of the powers that be in North Vietnam, they wouldn't have won. But now when they finally did win, April 30th, 1975, that ended the Vietnam War. But I'll tell you this much, they still had to pay a price that actually has affected them and the way they run the country to this very day. America is always going to be the underdog. America is always going to be the redhead stepchild. America is always going to be the dirty dog, you know. But you know what? Our lifestyle, no matter what we think about it, is so great. Every person in the world, once they get to know our lifestyle and experience our lifestyle, they want to be part of it. They want it to be so. Well, us darn capitalists there in the South, we already, you know, we spoiled those people there. Now the North Vietnamese had to deal with it, because now they had the whole country. How do you deal with it? You take some of the people from the South, some from the North. Some of the people from the North, some from the South. Well, you know, that poison, the capitalism of America had already gotten into the bloods of the people that was in the South. So when they sent people north, the people in the north got a taste of it. They wanted it. The people they sent north from South Vietnam, they got a taste of it. They wanted it. if you go to Vietnam right now, rest assured they're communists. I mean, you know, the communist philosophy is quite well and wide. But if you don't go ahead and try to mix the politics with the pleasure, you know what? You're going to find that a lot of things you're used to here in America is right there in Vietnam. And it's not an accident. It's not an accident at all. It's the whole situation is that I truly believe in a way that we take for granted. America has been blessed, and each and every one of us has been blessed to be in America. When I was a kid, I could not understand why anybody else would want to be anything other than American. Now I understand now about, you know, pride in, you know, your national origin, your social environment, things of this sort. But the whole situation is capitalism isn't something that's just in the U.S. You got to start here. But I'll tell you right now, people are very, very astute. The fact that capitalism is something good and not to be frowned upon. And once they get a taste of it, no matter what country they're in, it has an impact on that country. It had an impact on Vietnam. That impact goes on to this day. It took me 30 years to get our daughter out of Vietnam. And we had grandkids. They were scared to death of Grandpa. And my granddaughter, biggest of all, she was scared. So she needed help with homework. She would not approach Grandpa at all. Anyhow, she became very close. I mean, she's very close to my heart now. She's 29 now, married, but you know what? When she got here, she approached me and said, Grandpa, what do I need to do, you know, when I go to college? What is it I need to take to make the most money? Well, naturally, you go and become a lawyer, right? You might have to mess people over, but you make money messing those people over. Well, she went ahead and decided, you know, that'd be good. So she thought about it. Then she watched on TV where a lawyer had to go ahead and help a man who was guilty, did horrible things, get free. So what I have to do is, well, you know, if you take his case, then you have to do everything you can to give him a legitimate defense. And you know, sometimes a guy that committed horrible crimes, he goes free. Oh, now she didn't want to be a lawyer. Now she was going to the medical field. So she went into the medical field, and she's doing good at it. I mean, okay, she's married now, she's 29 years of age, but you know what? She's still going to school. Then the one thing that she hit up with me when she got here is, you know what? I feel that God blessed me and my family because we thought we'd never be able to come here. But we're here now. And by God getting us here, He's given us the opportunity. He's given me the opportunity to go and make something in my life and do something to do better for me and my family. And I'll tell you what, before she even thought about getting married or anything, she had mom and dad who made sacrifices for her in Vietnam. She remembered those sacrifices. She helped her mom and dad get on her feet. Then they went ahead and the biggest thing, gee, how do we tell your grandfather we're getting married? And you know, grandfathers are like that. If you know, they have a special granddaughter, nobody's good enough for them. So, you know, they went ahead and was very, okay, how are we gonna do this? So finally I got to meet him, got to talk, and he's a pretty good guy. Now his family's in medicine too. But the whole situation is, she thought so much of her mom and dad, knowing so much of what sacrifices they made for her and her two brothers, that when they got married, and this was confusing to me, she kept her name, her family name. And of course, it's the same thing with my daughter and her husband. She kept her family name, he kept his family name. I'm saying, you know, it must get very confusing because I spent 4 years in Vietnam, and I never knew that it would work that way. Then when I got back here, my strange concept of how things should be, I found out there were people who got married here in America who lived here all their lives, were American born, that The same thing happens here. So see, you learn something new every day.
I have a question. I've heard that, you know, in, like tracking the technology, what they had and when, what we had and when. To your knowledge, do you know whether or not, we had technology to take down that Roswell crash in 47?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, so
And I
that's
think
what
it
I
actually
thought.
happened. I think that the technology was there in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And I think it brought it down. It was called Project Diana.
What was it called?
Project Diana.
Oh, that's my sister's.
Is that you think that was a Tesla spinoff possibly?
Well, it was a very powerful radar actually, and it interfered with your guidance system.
Radio waves.
Oh yeah. I don't want to touch on this too often much because I don't know a whole lot about it. But when you talk about radio waves and it dealt with Project Diana, there's a close proximity and parallel with what we call the gravitational waves that we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And the situation is, this was a high resolution approximating radar. With that radar, and by the way, it was not Air Force, it was the United States Army Corps of Engineer radar. And, you know, we wanted to go ahead and check out certain things on the moon. That radar, 1946, was the first radar in history that was capable of letting us bounce a radar beam off the moon and back to Earth.
Hmm.
That's how powerful that radar was. I have to say, I personally believe, I know it to be a fact, but I have to say I personally believe that what happened there was that the radar interfered with their guidance system. And it interfered with their guidance system as they came in over the northern poles, right off the coast of the United States, entered into the U.S. at that location, and it started to interfere with their guidance system there. It didn't recover. The end result was they crashed here in the Roswell area, actually Corona is where they crashed. And they had several crashes as a result of that. Because you see, just like we didn't launch rescue attempts, when we have airplanes that go down, they launch rescue attempts also.
What did you say about the poles? I didn't catch that part when they came, when you said something about the poles?
Yeah, the situation is, when you use traversable wormholes as a means of getting from point A to point B in the intergalactic space, or even the situation of multidimensional travel, then the situation is, when you exit those, you talk about a sonic boom. There's massive damage could happen.
Yeah.
One time that happened, and it was in Canadian area, and the effects of that was over 600 miles area, 600-mile location, and we had no idea how to explain it. What we did do, though, was to convince the Canadians to tell their people that, oh, well, you know, we had this electric tower. It exploded, and that's what caused the damage to the property, because there was property damage. Well, if you have a transformer out here go out, it might affect the immediate area, you know, a couple miles around, not 600 miles. But that was the effective cover, and they make it clear in the documentation that it's an effective cover.
So that's when they're vulnerable, it's when they go in and out of the dimensionality?
Well, yeah, that's why they have to come just right above our atmosphere. They can't, if they enter in our atmosphere, there's problems. And the reason they come over the poles, if there is a problem, there's less likelihood of it being a international incident, so to speak. But there was a problem when they come over the northern poles, and that problem was this. Any attack on the United States from the former Soviet states by missiles, and even with bombers, would follow the same trajectory. There is, and this is a known fact, I can even produce the document, let you see it, that the United States and the former Soviet states, and even now it's in existence, that we agreed to talk to the former Soviet states and Russia now, and they agreed to talk to us in the event there was a large number of unidentified flying objects that seemed to be on a course to attack the U.S. before we launched any missiles. This is a key issue because in between 1960 and 1963, it was believed that the Soviet Union would be in a situation where they felt that they could successfully launch a nuclear attack on the U.S. and win. We believe that so much that we prepared the Strategic Air Command.
What?
I'm sorry?
Strategic
Air Command, SAC, to be ready to be launched, you know, because they're going to make the first strikes against the communist countries. But the way they did this, it was classified as a secret film. It was called Design for Survival.
There what was the name of the secret film?
Design for Survival.
Is it still a secret?
I have a copy. I got a copy of it right here, as a matter of fact.
Really?
Yeah, I got a copy.
How long is it, just out of
Out of the
curiosity?
middle, huh?
How long approximately is it?
I think it's in 5 parts.
Oh, wow.
Because but it's not all that long, maybe 90 minutes or so.
One more quick question, back to Vietnam. Do the people living in Vietnam during the war know about these enemy helicopters, and what did they think they were, and do you think they're still flying around there?
Oh, they are still having times when they have UFOs up here. People are still reporting UFOs here. And as a matter of fact, on my Facebook page, I have people from Vietnam who hit up on it and talk about what they've seen. There was a crash in Vietnam here about 3 years ago, and here we have what's called the International Law Enforcement Training Center. We had some people from Vietnam, law enforcement people, who, was talking to some of them about how long it took us to get our daughter out of Vietnam. And of course, that wasn't the Vietnamese government, that was your government doing this. And to a degree, yes, that's true. But the whole situation is, they played a part in it too, also. But some of these people, the national law enforcement, they were involved in that crash. And to my astonishment, and this was a guy who was a big wig in the government. Then also, they had a female, she was a colonel in the National Police Force. She was also a diver. She was actually involved in recovering some of that documentation. So she asked me, says, could we compare notes? Okay, I'm still sensitive to the situation that, like right now, for me to travel overseas, officially, they tried to say I never had a security clearance. Unofficially, when they were going to court-martial me, they had to advise me about the top out of the secret clearance I had. Also about that secret clearance being unique at, it would go higher or lower depending on what classification I needed to accomplish those specific missions that they put before me. But the whole situation is they go ahead, they hit up on this, and I'm sitting back thinking, okay, there's nothing to UFOs officially. Well, at the same time, when I gave a talk in Germany to the, it's the equivalent of the governor of Bavaria, they said president of Bavaria. He was an Air Force officer in the German Air Force. He had UFO sightings. He was involved in a couple of very high strangeness events dealing with UFOs. Anyhow, it was supposed to be by invitation, and, the Wartsburg military community was able to send 125 people there. And of course, you know, everybody wanted to go, because these are pretty good parties they throw. Well, you know, I really didn't want to go. I had other plans that I wanted to go with, but I was told, you know, we'd like for you to go. I'd say, well, I appreciate y'all for going. And we go, okay, let's put it this way. You are given a lawful order, you will go. And I wound up going. Well, when I got there, we were there for maybe a couple of hours. Then my first sergeant came in, and he said, Sergeant Stone, I don't know what's going on. They want you to give a talk. For what? They want you to talk about UFOs.
Wow.
I said, now remember, I was working on my first book there also. The first book I ever wrote, I was in the military while I was working there. And my first sergeant actually supported me.
Can I ask you how many crashes you've participated
UFO
in?
incidences that I was involved with was approximately 12 while I was in the military.
12? And how many of those were there any survivors?
3.
3 of those there were survivors in.
Corona was your main.
Oh, he was always with me. Okay, I'm gonna tell you about the situation. Our visitors will pick out people. They're gonna follow throughout life. And that's so they learn more about us as societies. When I first met Corona, he was like a child. I didn't feel afraid. I mean, after all, he looked just like any other child. I knew that other people couldn't see him, which I thought was kind of weird, but still, just like a child. I found a little bird that had fallen out of its nest. It'd only been hatched maybe a day or so. Well, I'm a kid, what, 6, 7? The bird could speak, and it was yelling. I'm thinking, okay, I'll take it home. I'll heal it, and I'll try to get back in its nest. Well, first of all, never go and try to put gloves on if you're going to pick up a bird, because if it gets the scent of the human, the bird's not going to return to the nest, another bird is. So I went ahead and I got the bird and I ran home. Well, what do? If you have a cut on your arm or something? You hold it underwater, right? Wash off the blood. I did that to the bird. So the bird died, right? And to me, I don't like killing anything. And this was like, I took a life. It was on par for a grown-up saying taking another human life. Maybe unintentionally, nonetheless, it died, and it was my fault. So it tore me up inside. Now, I say Corona, only Corona's not the little boy. It's not the little blonde-headed boy that I knew. And he's standing there, and he's chastising me. It's, what's going on with you? That was just a little bird. But you're here, you're crying. I feel all this pain. I feel all this hurt. Remember, they feel what you feel. You feel what they feel. And he won't answer to all this stuff. Me, I was no longer, mourning the death of that little bird right now. I was frightened. I was scared to death. I wanted to get the heck out of Dodge. I ran. We had this sofa, and it was category. I got behind it, and he looked over it and looked down at me, and I don't know how I got out. If you ask me how I honestly feel, I became airborne at that time and jumped over it. Then I went and hid by a pen, and he looked out on the other side, and this is how I told one of you people that they could just laughing, actual monotone and not just thought. He looked out and was laughing. And I thought, this is not a good thing. So I got up and I ran. And we had the refrigerator and the kitchen sink. There's a little space in between there. I hid in there. And for anything to come toward me, they'd have to go where I'm facing straight. Anyhow, behind me, I felt these like bony fingers scratching me on the neck. So to say, you can run, but you can't hide. Now, for the next couple of weeks, I got to see Corona as a little boy. And he was trying to explain to me what was going on, but I was still afraid. The one thing I knew, this was not the little boy. He may appear to be that way. This was a monster.
Monster.
And I asked my mom and dad, I ladies and gentlemen, my mom and dad thought, you know, I was just getting a little psychotic. Dr. Rose, you know, I talked to him about it. Dr. Micklewade, I talked to him about, no, they were medical doctors. And they were just telling my mom and dad, look, you'll outgrow this, it's just an overactive imagination. That gave me no silence at all. I mean, I was scared. I had to sleep with the light on. I wanted to cover up my head. But Corona was very, very sensitive to all this. And he was explaining to me, you know, choose people at a very young age. We want to know what you're really like, not what some people you call politicians would like to tell us what you're like and what they would like for us to believe you're like. Finally, at a very young age, I came to a conclusion. Either I accept the fate that's been dealt to me and live it and suffer the consequences. And anybody out there who thinks there's no consequences, there's consequences. Believe me, you live a very lonely life. You're isolated from almost everyone in society. And they pick up on the same of this. That's why they try to go ahead and back off, leave you some space, as we used to say. But I had to decide, either I go ahead, fight it, and lose my moment, so to speak, or accept it and learn from it. I decided I would go ahead and accept it and try to learn from it. That's how I got involved in this. But as a learning process, I found out there were a lot of people out there who were also experiencing things, not necessarily chosen to have one of the entities fallen throughout their life, but had experiences. Those experiences would affect them for the rest of their life.
Was Corona, what species was he? Or is he?
How do you mean, what's the
Corona,
I mean-
where did Corona come from as far as
Yeah.
you know?
Okay, Corona came, you've heard me talk about the planet 100 light years away, and if you are using antimatter, it's an hour and 40 minutes
Right.
to get from there to here. He comes from a planet that's approximately 100 light years away.
Wow.
And you want to tell you a little secret? Kepler radar has already found that planet, or the Kepler satellite has already found that planet. NASA has never admitted to me that there's life there, but it's in what they call a Goldilocks zone, and there's a high probability that life as we know it could exist there. The whole situation is, he would tell you, because I'll try to bring the Smithsonian Institute actually did a drawing for me, a printing, and I'll try to bring that tomorrow and let you guys look at it. But you know, in the I can't remember the Elephant Man, where he says, "I'm not a monster. I'm not a monster. I'm a man. I'm a human being." Actually, he got to the point where people were talking about the evils of the lizard people, or the reptilians. Well, he would go around, "I'm not a lizard, I'm not a lizard, I'm a sentient being." That was one of the highlights of, you know, our relationship. The other one was when I decided, and this was right here in Roswell, that, you know, these are things that were imaginary throughout my life, because I finally convinced myself, don't be a fool, don't go out there and public start talking about these things. And he wasn't trying to convince me to go out and talk about it. He was trying to convince me that what had happened in my life was real, and that I should honor that. I don't know how to explain this, okay? So what do you mean honor? But I should honor that fact that, you know, we had that relationship. We had that relationship. So it's like you're talking to your imagination, right? Because we're sitting at the table. I can set the scene for you. If you're in my kitchen, we have the kitchen table right there, and I was facing off to the west, and he was on this side of me. So he's facing off to the north. And, you know, he says, I'm right here, you see me. You're part of my imagination, you don't exist. I don't know why this has happened, but you're not reality. I'm not reality. In not reality, they picked up a dinner plate, held it up, and he dropped it. And when he dropped it, it shattered, and it made a lot of noise, and my wife's standing there, and she turned around, what the heck are you doing? Oh, nothing. And, you know, well, what happened? I said, I accidentally knocked it off the table. Well, she turned around, and he says, how do you explain that? And I said, you know, I must have subconsciously just knocked it off the table. He says, picked it up again, and my wife turned around, looked, she's, and I'm saying, what's wrong? I see it there, I grab it real quick. But how did that get just standing in the air? What just standing in the air? That plate. And oh, he said, tell her it was your imagination had an effect upon her. So, you know, unfortunate in the way that she's been there when things happen. In Vietnam when things happen. I almost lost my left eye. We went to this cave, and our visitors was there. We didn't know it was our visitors, but we went to the cave. You know, as we got further and further back, and this isn't unusual, but we had a Crick 25, that's a field radio, radio telephone with us. We put someone on the outside of the entrance to the cave, and as we went back, we got as far back as we could to where we still had communication on the outside. So now we had to use runners, you know, to send back to where the radio was. We posted one man there where they could go ahead. Now, Dewey Baudian, we had the top and we had the bottom. This was somewhere in the middle. So we would expect to meet heavy resistance with the NVABC because they had everything in the middle. So we went ahead, we got to the inside of it, and it was like we went several hundred feet on the inside. And, you know, it was getting dark, and all of a sudden it started getting lighter, and I was like, what's going on? Well, we got into this area that was big, wide, and open, and it looked like a huge laboratory. Then we started to see these little gray guys coming out. No words were spoken. But what happens, no one told them, hey, when you get back here, don't worry about it. You're going to run into this big, large area that's some type of laboratory, and you're going to see these little gray guys running all over the place, okay? But it's no harm. Don't worry about it. No one gave the order to fire. But one shot rang out, and all heck was breaking loose. And, you know, everyone was being told to fall back. But at the same time, the first shot rang out, it got like, you know, you have a light bulb. You turn it on. It's, you know, all white. If you look right inside the light. It's like we were inside a light bulb. I could hold my hand this close to me, and I couldn't see it. But, you know, I could hear people yelling, fall back, and, you know, trying to figure out, fall back where? No one can see where they're going to be going. And all of a sudden, I go down. I don't know whether I shot or what, but I remember going down. Next thing I know, I wake up, and I'm outside. The guy I always called the Colonel. And by the way, it wasn't a standard unit went in here. This was actually one of the recovery teams. But we had military people on the outside because there's a military operation going on. And they couldn't find anyone. We could see one area, we could look out, we could see our troops on the outside, and it looked like they were walking on air. So we gave the direction, okay, you have people in this area, go ahead, have them take their trenching tools and dig up a couple of scoops of earth there. Well, they did. We saw the shovels go down. It looked like they just went to plain air, you know, where the people were standing. But when they pull it up, toss it, it would be earth, you know. It would be dirt, gravel, whatever. So we'd see this. And this was all before all this other stuff happened. But anyhow, I wound up being outside. when I got outside, I went ahead, I had my eye all bandaged up. But I do remember, if we don't do something, he's gonna lose that left eye. And I thought that was our people talking. But, you know, when I came to, I remembered that much. I didn't remember where I was at or anything. Anyhow, I asked him, I said, how'd you guys get me out of there? He said, we didn't get you out. I said, what do you mean you didn't get me out? We didn't get you out. We have no idea how you got there. I said, well, what's wrong with one eye? He says, we don't know. We didn't patch that. I said, oh. I said, well, does it have anything that shows that it's from North Vietnam? He says, don't worry about that. We're taking that patch off before you leave here and putting a good old USA made patch on.
Wow.
Because we need this, because this doesn't look like any type of patch we've ever seen before. Anyhow, I got full recovery, you know, on my right eye, my left eye. Now, let me ask you this.
Who shot the thing?
Who
Who
started
shot
to shoot?
him?
It was US forces that were shooting
We're shooting inside the cave
inside the cave. I mean, you know,
to the gray aliens.
yeah, and everyone else joined in because everyone was scared. No one knew what was going on.
But do you know by a fact that it was United States or it was somebody
What?
else?
Do you know for a fact that it was the United States or was it somebody else?
That was
Well,
shooting.
no, that base there, that wasn't ours. The gray guys definitely were not US soldiers. No, they South Vietnamese or North Vietnamese.
But they're from another planet. So why
Yes.
would you shoot them? Why would anybody shoot
Well,
them?
they might be from this
Because
planet.
we feared it. I'll tell you right now, to this day, if you, well, to this time, and I guarantee you, with you, if you have one of our visitors approach you, and you're not expecting it to happen, it comes out of clear blue sky. If you have a weapon, you're gonna use that weapon.
No, I wouldn't.
You say that right now.
Yeah.
But I
I wouldn't.
guarantee you would. It was like Peter, when he was with Christ. He told Christ,
Okay,
I will
I
never
would,
deny you.
but for real, I wouldn't.
You, right now, you'd like to
I would
think.
shoot a human, but I wouldn't
Well,
shoot
you
an
like
If you were a
to think-
trained soldier, you might.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, no, if you're a trained soldier, I'm trained.
Yeah.
And now the reason I'm telling you this, I had a person who was wanting the UFOs to be real, who wanted to go ahead and meet them. Oh God, I'd love to meet them just one time. Well, guess what? The meeting took place, and the meeting took place in the dark. The person had a .32 caliber pistol. What do you think that person did? Out of fear. Now, you know why?
the
Now, do you
aliens
know
don't
why
have
she
any-
did that?
The aliens don't have anything to shoot at anybody?
Oh yeah, if they want to, they could put the darn on us very quickly.
Can I ask you a quick question? Since we're on the topic, I wanted to bring up Phil Schneider.
Perfect.
That's what I was thinking.
Absolutely.
Were you?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, since it's kind of on the same subject where he was in the dome in Dulce, New Mexico, and reportedly went down into one of the levels he wasn't supposed to be in, and pulled his sidearm and started shooting. It's kind of like what we're talking about here. And you see that, you're just automatically, that's your reaction. You
And
just
that is
start
something
shooting.
he thought he would never do.
Yeah, yeah. So,
lot of
so
people aren't aware of that.
one thing that I've done a lot of research over the years. One of the things that I've noticed is a lot of people are skeptical about Phil Schneider. So I want to know, what's your opinion of Phil Schneider?
You know, his wife once told me, said, you know, her husband's dead. I'm still alive. And that's a big question a lot of people have.
His wife.
What's
What?
that?
What's the question?
No, his wife said, her husband's dead, I'm still alive. And a lot of people says, well, he's telling the truth and you're not. That's not what she meant at all.
What did she?
What she was trying to understand is, why did they let me still live and him be dead? Now,
You weren't going out on the circuit like he was either, were you?
no, not at that time.
I mean, he was going hard.
Yeah.
He was.
Really
we met.
hard.
We met one time.
I'll talk about that.
But Coronado is a little alien in front of yours.
Well, you know, I was scared. going to the grades. I already had contact when I was 7 years old.
Oh, okay, so
But
you
now
don't- you don't
going to
feel
the
fear.
grades, when I went to Vietnam, we went there to recover that B-52.
But it has
I was the
something to do
first
with
one
you,
to
it
start
didn't do
shooting.
anything.
Were you aware of that?
The what?
When we went to Vietnam, I went TDY to Vietnam to recover a B-52 that went down.
Yeah.
Allegedly, it was shot down. When I first saw the B-52, I thought, you know, that B-52, it looks much smaller than what I think the B-52 used to be. It was the first time I ever saw one.
Right.
And it was like a giant hand just picked it up out of the air and just put it down on the jungle floor there.
Right.
I start walking from the front, walking to the back around the tail of the aircraft. When I got back there, I saw this little alien coming out real slow, out in, you know, the vegetation here. And one or two more follow me. And I look up and I see him, I'm thinking, what's going on here? And I start to back off. But then, and this is exactly how he said it, if I live to be 110, I'll remember it. Clifford, what are you doing here? You are not supposed to be here. I went ahead and I had my M16 over my shoulder like this, with the barrel pointing down. I went and I tripped, and when I tripped, I got backed up and I had my rifle up, my M16 up, and I started to shoot and started to yell out, VC, VC, and you know, everyone else started to fire. And we went ahead, they didn't run after us, but we ran on back and we had our staging area on the other side of this little stream that tell you it was a river, but I mean, it was only about, what, knee high? We ran across, and after we got across on the other side, that stopped. They wasn't following us. When we got there, the guy I always called the colonel, he goes in and he says, we need we need a person to go over there and see how the situation is now, because we have to go back and set situations where we can recover that B-52. And no one was about to volunteer. And I wasn't about to volunteer. And anyhow, I just went ahead, you know, was wondering, what will we get back there? You know, knowing that they already exist, and feeling within my heart they don't mean us any harm. Why did I, above all others there, why did I pull the trigger and fire the first shot? Me. To this day, I cannot answer that.
Did you see anything falling? Or?
No, it didn't even
Oh,
praise
so
it.
nothing happened.
Anyhow, I finally,
You thought
I decided I have to walk back over there.
Right.
So the colonel says, where are you going? I turned to him, I said, you know, I don't understand any of this. We were going to a field training exercise in Florida, and we're here in some country that's supposed to be hostile to us, because I didn't know it was Cambodia, I didn't know we landed in Vietnam. It would be till I came back on a permanent assignment there that I found out. But, you know, here it is, I go back, and, you know, the other soldiers are following me. One by one, they picked up their gear and started following me. We went back and cut the B-52 in parts. We got them flown out of there, got the crew flown out. By the way, the crew was killed by what they call a SAM-7 missile going into the aircraft and exploding.
What crew was killed?
What's that?
What crew?
The crew of the B-52. They weren't killed by the aliens or anything.
Oh, there were people or there were other things?
American crew to be.
Yes, it's an American.
They were killed by whom?
Yeah, there wasn't a spaceship. B-52 is a bomber.
They were killed by other people, other.
No, they were not killed by our visitors. They were killed by a SAM-7 surface-to-air missile.
SAM-7?
That was
Who
not-
shot it?
The North Vietnamese fighter, because they were on
Oh,
a
okay.
bombing raid over North Vietnam.
I forgot that we're in the cave thing.
I remember you explaining about that encounter on Gaia and cosmic
Mhm.
disclosure. But I have a question about that, because when you encountered that alien being and he said, Clifford, you're not supposed to be here. Do you, when I first heard you say that, and then the same question came to my mind when I heard you say it again today, I wonder what do you mean by you're not supposed to be here? Do you know exactly what does that mean?
Sure do.
Okay.
I think I'm telling it for the first time today.
Okay.
Because you're the first one that's ever asked.
Big question.
my personal belief is that, remember, I was medically rejected from military service. My purpose is to serve people, not to kill people. That's what they wanted me to do also. So I think that had everything to do with it.
I see.
We had a situation where we had some of the VC corner surrounded. And our radios went down, their radios went down, and I was trying to explain to them that the war had ended and we shouldn't be shooting at anyone anymore. Well, their radio wouldn't work. And I went ahead and I said, okay, look, I'm on RTO, but I can come over and I'll try to fix your radio. You can call your people, then you'll see. And you know, I'm not telling you the truth. Why would I do this? You can shoot me right there on the spot. And they thought, okay, that's plausible. And they reminded me, you get the radio to work and we find out that the war's still on. You're the first to die. You know, when in that type of situation, you wonder, will your family know that you died with honor, that you were not a coward? That, you know, one of the prayers you had was that your death wouldn't be in vain. Anyhow, I went ahead and went over, and I was working on the radio, and they decided, well, the war has to be over.
It has to be what?
Has to be over, because I wouldn't do that. That'd be something foolhardy and foolish for anyone to do, knowing that if that radio worked and they said the war's not over, I'd be the first one shot. So we got together and we were talking. We took the prisoner. The one guy, and I met him later too, because he survived and lived out the war. As a matter of fact, I met him in Oklahoma City. That's where he's at to this day. He turns to me and said, "You put your life on the line to go ahead and have us surrender, and you could have gotten killed. Why did you do that? You have us outnumbered. You would have won anyhow." I said, "Well, you know, if I got you to surrender, no one dies." And he says, "Yeah, but you know, the whole situation, this is a war. People die in war." I says, "Yeah, but you know, that doesn't mean that the war is right, and that if we have the opportunity to save lives, we shouldn't go ahead and try to take that opportunity to save lives." He says, "But we're the enemy. Why did you take that step to save the enemy's life? Not your people's life, but the enemy, the people you would have killed anyway." And I said, "You know what? The whole situation is that we're enemies because of the war. Would we be enemies if it wasn't for the war?" I said, "The whole situation is, I want you guys to survive, because I know from other events that, you know, I've been involved with, you have families, these people have families. Why is it that we go ahead and kill them, and the people still have to go ahead and suffer? The families left behind. You take the father of children, and sometimes mothers, because I'll tell you a little secret. In Vietnam, women were soldiers also.
Or what?
In Vietnam, women were soldiers too, particularly North Vietnam. But no, that right there is what I really believe happened. That they did not want me to be in the war to begin with. Now with me, I wanted to serve my country, and I wanted to get in. But
A quick follow-up question though. When you're interfacing, that's basically what you did was interface, right? That ability that you have, can you possibly use that with other human beings? Like, can you kind of tell what people are thinking?
oh yeah. Do you want to use it though that way?
Well, no, I'm just curious.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you get to talk to some of my kids from Job Corps, they always refer, first time I ever heard the word, period. One of the girls said there, he's a sensitive. And I never thought of it that way, you know, because when I talk about the kids in Job Corps, I call them my kids. And that's from the heart. People go ahead and say, well, those are bad kids. No, they're not. They're kids that had hard times growing up. And the whole situation is, if you talk to some of them, they'll tell you of some strange things that happen. I went ahead, I told them, you know what? I can't use this to make me rich. I can't use this to better my life. But the whole situation is, and the one good thing about it, I can use it to help you and try to make things better to where later on in your life, it will better your life. And actually it turned out that way. I know a lot of kids that, I had kids tell me they didn't see themselves getting above the age of 18. And I told them, well, then we have to work together to go ahead and make you see there are many things in life worth living for, and make that your drive to live for those things. But when, you know, people come up and tell me, oh, those are bad kids, this is the last stop before they go to jail, I'll go up with a smile on my face and say, let me tell you about my kids in Job Corps. The only reason I quit Job Corps was that I had medical problems. We drove a bus. We'd drive a bus with taking the kids to various locations. And as being security, we were the bus drivers. I couldn't live with myself if I was to have an accident with one of those buses and got any of those kids killed or even seriously injured. That being said, I've had experiences where we had kids killed, and that was difficult. We had one kid while I was out there that was murdered. And we knew it was going to, and I kept trying to get him to stop it. Well, the old boy that did it, he took out a, what do they call it, a court order saying we couldn't go around his place. But there was all kinds of problems happening.
Is this in New Mexico, by the way?
Yes.
The bus driver didn't want them to go around him.
What's that?
I'm saying, because it says somebody that they didn't, somebody said that they didn't want them around them. Was that the bus driver?
I was the bus driver.
Oh. Oh.
Yeah, I had a CDL.
He has a question.
You've been at 12 crash retrievals, but I was just curious if you could describe the insides of some of these vehicles to us. I know that Bob Lazar, you know, has been supposedly, involved in back engineering and some of that stuff, but Stanton Friedman doesn't lend a lot of credibility to Bob Lazar. And I wanted to know if you've ever met Bob Lazar.
I met Bob Lazar.
And what
familiar with Stan Friedman.
I'd like to know what your feelings are about how credible you think Bob Lazar is. And
A long time ago now, I don't buy into everything he says, and there's a reason for that. And the same thing, what's his name, I say, but I learned a long time ago, never ever call no one a liar. Never ever go ahead. Used to bother me when people would call me a liar or that I was, a con artist, I was this, I was that. Used to bother me. It don't bother me no more. The whole situation is be true to thyself. And if you're true to yourself, then that's what's important.
could you describe the interior of some of these?
Are you gonna be here tomorrow?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, ask me tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't have copies of what we're talking about, but, I'll let you folks that are here tomorrow see it.
One question about interfacing. Were there others like you that had the same kind of job you
Yes,
did?
when I got out of the military, that I knew of 7 other people who were there that did this.
Have any of them come out other than you that you know of?
I don't know of any that have come out. I've heard stories.
Interesting. I'm assuming they're still alive.
One guy even approached me and told me about the guy getting killed in one car accident. And he said, you know, he's asked me, was I worry about that? Well, you know, I gotta keep on track and doing what I'm doing. I can't go ahead and let fear factor go ahead and tell me stop. You know, they were doing everything, they sent me for a psychological evaluation. When I started to come out and talk, that backfired. They then went ahead and started proceedings to try to get me court-martialed. That backfired over big time. One of the people doing this to me, demanded to see, they actually made me do intensified PT training, hoping that I would drop dead, because the word got back I had a heart condition. And when they, the lieutenant colonel that was really behind most of this wanted to see my military records, and I had no objections. He has a right to see my medical records. He has a right to see my medical records, but he has to go through a medical officer to do that. He can't just go ahead and pull them, and he has to have justification. He had me, well, the Inspector General at the Department of Army Inspector General, I called and I asked, oh yeah, he's got that right. And I said, you know what? I know that I'm just a sergeant, and you're a full bird colonel, and you're working there at the Pentagon. But let me tell you a little secret. A man is a man is a man. I don't care what rank he is. And sir, you put your pants on the same way I do, one leg at a time. Then fine. He's going to get to see my medical records. I'm going to take him to him. And I'm going to tell him, you know, we got a copy machine here. If you want copies of them, you make them right now. But if you call again, then I'm going to have to bring him to the hospital because what could be in there. And he started to stay on this phone. Decided to stay on this phone. And I was calling him from home. So I hung up and I go on over, take my medical records with me, go on in. I go on in Scolari's office. I shut the door and lock it behind me. I said, sir, you want to see my records? I slapped them down right in front of me. Oh, Sergeant, you know, we're just worried about your health. Sure you are. That's why you have me doing all this other stuff. You go through them, but you know what? You can have me run 24 hours a day, but there's no way on God's green earth I'm going to drop dead. So you do your damnedest, okay? If these records are going to help you, you go for it. But I will fight you to hell and back. And I think I'll come out when I know it. You're an officer, you're a great officer, and enlisted people never win over officers, let alone trophy officers. Well, ladies and gentlemen, by the end of the day, when everything was said and done, I went ahead, got one of the highest awards for peacetime service, which is called the Meritorious Service Medal. 3 officers that was involved with trying to get me court-martialed were relieved of duty. 2 of which were forced to retire, but Lieutenant Colonel was where he was, because he even got another, he was messing with a whole lot of people, and I think that's why we locked horns. He went ahead and got 1 major thrown out of the service, and when he was doing that, he had officers call, and he got this major to stand up and said, okay, you see this man, you know what I'm doing to him. You don't do exactly what I tell you, I'll do the same thing to you. Well, he did to another major. Gave him an adverse officer's evaluation report. Then the officer said, okay, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to fight this. He says, you can't fight it. I have to give you permission, or the executive officer has to give you permission. Well, we didn't have an executive officer at the time. As the NCOIC administration, that would be me. So this major came and he says, Stoney, will you go ahead and sign off on this? I said, well, you know, Major Colonel Scolari will not let me do that. He says, oh, if you don't do it, then, you know, my career's over, there's nothing I can do. And I said, well, sir, you know, I can't do it. I'm not the executive officer. He says, as the admin here at the ROTC, you're the head person. There's no officer over it. You're it. So I went in and checked, and you know, I was it. So I went in and I signed. He said, you know, Scolari's going to come after you. I said, you know what? He's already coming after me. So let him do the best he can.
Is this major still alive?
This, the major's still alive.
Are you allowed to say his name, or you better rather not?
Right off my hand, I can't recall his name.
Okay.
Scolari's a real person. Scolari's the person that tried to get me done in.
But he's gone.
Huh?
Is he dead now?
Oh, no.
Wow.
No?
But they're retired, obviously, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah. And the whole situation is,
They finally took a chill pill, hopefully.
the Army hated me because, I already knew of Freedom of Information Act, Privacy Act. And the Army taught me well on how to use those. And I owe the Army everything. The Army owes me absolutely nothing, But I owe them everything because it was because of what they were doing to me. And before, when I had people who would write and I'd have to respond to Freedom of Information Act requests, I learned the tricks of the trade. For example, when people would come and ask about higher classifications and top secret. Well, the common, this is what you're taught to respond. There are only 3 classifications currently existing for any classification. That's confidential, secret, and top secret. And that's the response to this day you will get. I don't have to tell you anything about what we call the Sensitive Department and Information Program, are the levels that go into some of those programs. For example, within Project Center Lane. None of you heard of Project Center Lane, have you?
No.
Project Center Lane was the U.S. Army's project that was set up initially by the U.S. Army, later got control, was taken over by the DIA, of remote viewing. And within Project Center Lane, you had Project Center Lane, of course, that was set up under the SCI program, Sensitive Department of Information Program. And within each of the CIS levels that they had actually levels, numbered levels. For example, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. Now, eventually the public would be able to learn, if they knew what they were looking for, of level 4. From level 5 to level 12, to this day they don't acknowledge that. And a lot of people early on started coming out and they could have gotten themselves in serious trouble. Because to mention the fact that there were levels of information, this could really hurt people. And it was highly classified. That type of information is information that you would get a fair trial, but it would be a closed court-martial. Because you'd be dealing with information that officially wasn't supposed to exist. I think we miss almost all the time to sit here.
Yeah.
But please, if you haven't gotten up here, this right here is actually where General Brown went ahead and stated, we didn't call them UFOs at that time, but that's by a report in 73. But we called them unidentified, or we called them enemy helicopters.
That's very
So they are there.
So can we having a party at his house or what? I mean, this man is
I'm
so
gonna stick
crazy.
around maybe for after the weekend.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Do you live in the area?
No,
Where are you from?
I'm from Santa Cruz, California.
That's where I
Yeah.
went to high school.
Is that, I
I
tell you,
lived
this
in- I
happens
lived in
every
Petaluma.
time I do this.
What a trip.
It's so trippy.
love it.
Real, so synchronistic.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What's your name?
Eric.
Eric Sharon. Shara, I'm calling myself these
Right
days.
on, cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I'd love to. I mean,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have just had the great privilege.
Are you familiar with David Adair?
I think vaguely, but not
You should do some
overtly.
looking into David Adair, because I would love to have him and David Adair.
Is he a tall, thin man?
They're almost identical, and their stories
okay.
are very similar. but
Okay,
just-
I'll look it up. I'll look him up.
You got all your other ones, huh?
Oh, you have the other?
Don't you remember giving me a
Oh, sorry.